The pandemic has shifted our priorities a lot. We want our work to make a difference, to make us happy, as well as, of course, generate a healthy paycheck. More people want their work aligned with their values. I've written a lot about this, talk about it. A 2023 study found that people are continuing to ask themselves questions such as, quote, what makes me happy and whole? What truly satisfies me? 82% of employees say it's important for their organization to see them as a person, not just as an employee. But it also found that only 45% of employees believe their organization actually sees them that way. I have coaching clients coming to me wanting more satisfaction in their work, wanting their jobs aligned with their values. And often that includes seeking work, of course, in the clean energy sustainability economy. But what are the questions we need to ask ourselves? Today, we're going to find out from one of the most extraordinary thinkers, authors, and consultants on these issues. So prepare to be inspired and take notes. Welcome to Electric Ladies Podcast. We bring you stories, insights, tips, and advice from remarkably innovative women working on the front lines of corporate responsibility, energy, sustainability, and ESG-related issues. I'm your host, Joan Michelson. We talk about innovation, leadership, technologies, and careers, always bringing a new perspective. Find us anywhere you like to listen to podcasts on our website, electricladiespodcast.com, and through my Forbes articles as well. And please pass it on to your friends and leave us a 5-star review if you like the show. It helps other people find us. If you are at an inflection point yourself, looking for support, please reach out to me on Twitter or Threads or LinkedIn and let me know. We can help you no matter what industry you're in. Do you like your work? Do you want your work aligned with your values? What are the questions you need to ask yourself to determine what your next step is? Whether you're struggling or not, whether you think you're happy in your work or not, maybe your business is thriving. Well, let's find out from a master. I'd like you to meet Mary Morrissey. I'm going to abbreviate her bio because otherwise we'll be here all week. Mary holds a master's degree in counseling psychology and an honorary doctorate in humane letters. She's spoken 3 times at the United Nations. Get this, facilitated 3 week-long meetings with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I am envious. We'll talk about that in a minute. And other world leaders, met with Nelson Mandela, solving some of the most pressing issues of our time with some of these people, or addressing them, I should say. They still exist, of course. She's the author of best-selling books, including No Less Than Greatness, Building Your Field of Dreams, which became a PBS special, and a book that we're going to talk about today, Brave Thinking, The Art and Science of Creating a Life You Love. That came out this year. She's spoken to audiences across the globe and been helping organizations and top leaders engage their people, as well as coaching top performers for decades. So we need all the brave thinkers we can get working on the massive challenges the world faces today. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mary Morrissey to Electric Ladies Podcast. Welcome, Mary, and thank you so much for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be here, Joan. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So first of all, I am totally jealous and envious of your time with the Dalai Lama. He's on my top 10 people to meet list and interview. Even though I focus on women, I would definitely interview him. Talk about how that opportunity came about and the work that you did with him and the leaders that you convened with him.
I'd be happy to. I started when he was publishing. I read the first book and the second book. I attended a large stadium event with him, and I'm up in the nosebleed part of that. But I became captivated with, no matter what he wrote or said, I could never find one wavelength of victimhood or blame or grudge making out of what had happened, not only to him being exiled from Tibet, but what had happened with the Tibetan refugees and the people still in Tibet. Even today in Tibet, if you walk down the street and you say Omne Padme Hum, which effectively, if you walk down the streets of the US and say, Hear, O Israel, our Lord is God, or Our Father who art in heaven, or any other proclaimant of a pathway, If you do that in Tibet, it's considered sedition to the Chinese government. Not only you, but your family are put in hard labor for the rest of your lives. Just like that. No trial, no nothing. You just get captured and put away. But wow. I could hear no vengeance. I could hear, and I remember thinking, if you kind of give a little pass to somebody, you might give him a pass, but he doesn't hold that. And my question, which had been driving me in the study of real transformation over many years, how does he think? How does he hold his mind so that the output, he works vigorously for the freedom of Tibet, but without this other energy. So I started just visualizing, not even that often, but seeing myself sitting having a cup of tea with him. And he says, you have a question for me. And I get to ask my question. And I get to learn what he does to create that. And then a whole series of things occurred. And my first book came out, and I was signing the PBS agreement. And I was invited to speak at the Buddhist Christian conference in Chicago. And to give a talk on transcendentalism, the uniquely American version of transformation. And I didn't know that in my lecture, his brother would be there. So fast forward a couple of weeks later, His Holiness has got his team together and saying, I want to do a 7-year project. And over the course of 7 years, have 3 major meetings with innovators in the world, people who are innovative in science, technology, governance, medicine, education, ecology, and bring the world's greatest issues and see what we can innovate together for solutions. But we need someone who has an appreciation for all traditions, because in meetings, those are the things that most often ignite separation, division, people get up and leave, and we need someone to help hold the energy where all traditions are welcomed. And his brother said, well, I heard this woman speak. And the next thing I knew, the Office of Tibet was calling me and inviting me to Dharamsala for an interview. And I was so thrilled that I would maybe get to ask my question.
Wow.
Going through security, and then all of a sudden, as I'm walking in the room where he's going to be brought in, I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to ask me all these questions. And we had this beautiful interview. He was very curious and very open. And then at the end, so he's pouring tea, hands me a cup and says, you have a question for me? And then I got to ask my question. I said, how do you do it? How do you have all of this? And he says, first of all, Chinese people don't do this. Chinese government do this. And he says, we all have friends. Easy love, easy forgive. But we have sacred friends. Very, very difficult. Sacred friends, very, very difficult. He said, Chinese government, my sacred friend. Without Chinese government doing exactly what they do, I would never have had to evolve my heart to be bigger than the pain they bring. And so it's a practice that in Tibetan Buddhism called bodhicitta, which is you make your heart bigger than the pain. And you hold yourself accountable to living from that large heart. And that was his answer to that. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is extraordinary. And that just goes to the point of show up, and you never know who's going to be there, and you never know who you're talking to. You never know. I mean, I've had my own situations like that where I've been at a lunch and don't know who I'm talking to. And the next thing I know, I realize I'm talking to the president of a company who the next morning calls me and offers me a job that changed my life forever. And it was like, you just never know who you're talking to. But I love that. Evolve my heart to be greater than the pain. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that I can chew on that for about a year. I and the talented women I have on my show are all brave thinkers, in my view. And I think that statement alone is really an example of brave thinking that you just gave from the Dalai Lama. But we take intellectual risks, we take emotional risks like that one, we take even physical risks and financial risks sometimes. We change industries, we learn new skills, we explore using our skills in different ways, move to strange cities. I've lived in 8 states and even countries for work that we think will be fulfilling, or maybe even for love or on a lark, friends who just travel to travel. Especially today when most of us can work remotely, You can be anywhere. I joke that I've stretched my comfort zone so many times that I moved it. What are brave thinkers to you?
My interest in this started many, many years ago. If I can tell a 5-minute quick story. I grew up in Beaverton, Oregon, had a high school experience like most young girls dream about. By junior year in high school, I was class vice president, head of the vice president of my class. I had a lead in the junior play. That year, I'm a homecoming princess. I'm on the drill team. My high school boyfriend had gone off to college, came home on spring break. May 1, I realize I'm pregnant. I tell my mom and dad I'm pregnant. This is 1966. We had a hasty 10-person wedding. 2 weeks later, the principal of the high school called me to his office and said, "Are these rumors true about you?" And I said, "Well, if the rumors are I'm pregnant and married in that order, then yes." And he just put his head in his hands and he says, "Mary, you have terrific honors and great grades, but you will not be allowed to return here for your senior year. It would be totally inappropriate for a pregnant girl to get mixed in with the normal girls. But if you want a diploma, a high school diploma," which I did because I had dreamed of being a teacher. This is 1966. So I didn't see this as a dead end getting pregnant, but definitely a detour. So I did want that diploma. And he said, "But if you want a diploma, there's a place for people like you. It's across the river." It was actually in a part of Portland. And it's not during the day, it's in the evenings. So it's a regular high school for normal kids during the day. And then at night becomes a high school for pregnant girls and delinquent boys. So the next fall I went in there and I'm walking up the stairs my senior year in high school and thinking every girl here is either pregnant or has a baby. Every guy is a delinquent. This is my new student body. Now I don't know where you were or your listener or viewer was when you walk into your senior year, but that's where I was. My son was born in December. I graduated from Washington Evening High School in May of 67. And in July of 67, I'm in an intensive care ward, having been diagnosed with fatal kidney disease. One kidney is totally destroyed with nephritis, kidney disease, and the other has 50% destruction. And in 1967, without transplants and dialysis available, this is a death sentence. And they're telling me that if we can get the blood toxin level in my body reduced enough to remove the right kidney, then maybe I'll have 6 months to live. Best shot. I have a 7-month-old son at home, and I'm terrified. And the God of my upbringing was not a friendly place to go when you felt like you had really screwed up. And clearly I had screwed up. I got kicked out of my school. My best girlfriends from 4th grade, their mothers got together and said they could no longer see me, as if what I had was contagious. So I lost my friends, my school, the student body, and now I'm relegated to a group of delinquents. Clear definition. And I must be a bad person and I don't deserve to live. And those were my thoughts here. I'm barely 18 years old. So finally, the night before the surgery, a woman walked in my room who identified herself as a chaplain offering prayers for people having surgery. The next day, she says, "Your name, I get the list of the most dangerous surgeries. Your name is at the top of the list. You want somebody to pray with you." And even though I felt like I was just being punished by this power, I said, "Okay." She pulled her chair next to my bed and she didn't do anything that looked like traditional prayer. She talked with me. And it started with her asking me, "So could you tell me what's been going on in your life the last year or two?" So I told her my story, at the end of which she looked at me. And Joan, she looked me right in the eye and she says, "Mary, everything's created twice." I was like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You actually know this. In fact, everybody knows this. Almost nobody knows the power of knowing this." And then she said, "The bed you're lying on, the nightgown you're wearing, the sheet covering you, the walls, the ceiling, the floor, all of this had to be a thought before it could be a thing." And she said, "You know that if you think embarrassing thoughts, your cheeks are going to get red. And if you think scary enough thoughts, your heart's going to beat faster. I can hear how much in your story, I can hear how much you love your little boy. I also can hear how much you've been hating yourself. You feel like you shamed your school, you shamed your family, you shamed your friends, you shamed yourself. And now that you're considering how everything is created twice, could you consider the possibility that that toxic thinking, that self-loathing, could actually have something to do with the chemistry in your body, and that just as if you think embarrassing thoughts or scary thoughts, your body's responding. And those toxic thoughts could actually have something to do with the toxicity that is rampaging your body and threatening your life. Now, this is 1967. Nobody I know in this era is thinking that what you think has anything to do with your health, or that, and there's not a mind-body clinic at Harvard and at UCLA and Stanford and all the major teaching hospitals. That's not happening in 1967. And yet she's suggesting to me that I have a component in this. And then she says, so if you could live, what would you do with your life? And I said, I'd raise my little boy and I'd become a teacher. And so she gave me, she didn't call it, she called it a visualization. I don't know what she called it, but we didn't know about visualization. Maybe it was an imagination. I don't know. But she said, so can you imagine with me that we're going to do, she called it a prayer. It was really words and a prescription for how to think. That will just imagine we're going to scoop up all that toxicity and it's going to get removed with that kidney that's going to be removed in the morning. And then after you have a few days where there's going to be pain, that's going to attract your attention. As that ebbs, your mind is going to want to go down the well-worn thoughts of the paths you've been thinking. So every time you start to notice a self-loathing thought, I want you to just interrupt that thought and say, no, that left with the kidney. And immediately imagine you're holding a little boy's hand, he's 5, and you hold that warm hand and you're walking into a school and that's you're with your boy and he's going into kindergarten. You give him a big hug and he goes to his kindergarten teacher. You hear the click of your heels around the corner and you're in your first classroom. And then fast forward and you're sitting in a big auditorium and there's caps and gowns. You hear your son's name called. And he turns and holds up his diploma and you're so grateful to have all the many moments with him that helped him have this success in his life. And then you fast forward and you're sitting in the front row of his wedding and he's marrying the love of his life. Your teaching career is flourishing. Just keep doing that. Today we would say I became unconscious competent. I didn't think, oh, this can help me and I'm doing it. I just knew after a while that I felt better thinking these thoughts. And it
was a visualization, really.
That's right. And we didn't understand then about the biochemical result from, everything is frequency and vibration. So ultimately, within a couple of weeks, my numbers had stabilized in the hospital. And they said, well, maybe you're going to get a little extra time. And if you go home and come to the urologist 3 times a week, we can measure your numbers. And maybe you'll have a week or 2, or maybe even 3 or 4 weeks at home before you have to come back. You have more time with your son. So I went home in an ambulance. I was so weak. And subtly and just over time, those numbers not only stabilized, but just started to improve. And after about 6 months, I'm in a hospital conference room with the surgeon who said to me, Mary, that left kidney, it was pockmarked, shriveled, full of nephritis. And he said, we have no science for why that one kidney now is functioning as a whole perfect kidney.
Wow.
But whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was turning my attention to what would I do with my life, holding those and just taking the steps that I could take along the way. I got well, gratefully, and then got into undergraduate work, but I didn't get curious yet about what really happened. What was the science behind this? Even though they said we don't have science, there had to be science behind this. And what were the underpinnings of,
because it was measurable, yeah.
What were the underpinnings of how real transformation, trans means to go beyond the form of your current life to produce something that's much more life-giving and difference-making, which is what you're doing, Joan, with your program. This beautiful podcast where you speak into issues with ideas to help us move to higher levels of understanding and then expression in the areas that really matter most to us. So then I got very curious and I began, that's what took me to studying all the world's religions, the philosophies. I got a master's degree in counseling psychology, but really also bringing in this era now comes the new physics and how the connections of that. So that began my work. And I opened my official work of training this in 1981. So it's been a long time.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for your kind words. It's really interesting because first of all, I want to call out the fact that you could have turned to that chaplain coming in and saying, I'm not religious, go away.
Yeah.
Right. And none of this would have happened. You also could have shut them down at any point. I mean, it was also, I want to acknowledge your openness in the moment. You didn't know that that's what you were doing, but there was something in you that was open, and I would guess that it wasn't just their survival instinct, although it might have been, but
It
kind
was,
of a searching for answers even then.
it was
Maybe the
Samuel
budding
Adams.
teacher in you.
Sam,
Um,
yeah, Samuel Adams once said, "Nothing heightens a man's senses like knowing he's going to the gallows in the morning."
yes.
So
He
that
also,
was part of it.
yeah, I love that. I love Samuel Johnson. He also, I've used a quote of his in codes of conduct I've done for big companies, where his other quote is,
Yes, Johnson.
integrity, yeah, Samuel Johnson, integrity without knowledge is weak and useless. Knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful, which is really the summation of the world we live in, right?
Mhm.
In your book, you wrote that um, brave thinkers, quote, brave thinkers know that their greatest control in their life is the power to direct the thoughts that help their dreams take form, unquote. And that's kind of the story that you just explained, right? And so this chaplain, and I'd be curious to know if you ever stayed in touch with them or circled back with them at all. But you learned from that, even at the moment or in
Study,
retrospect,
and the study
that
came
they
subsequent to that. But
subsequently, yeah, that they were, that's what that training was about the power of thought, right? And
mhm.
so what do you mean by brave thinkers know that their greatest control in their life is the power to direct their thoughts that help their dreams take form?
Well, there were two revolutions in the United States. The first was in 1775 era 76, which was a revolution for an experiment in American democracy and to become a free country. The second one was about 50 years later in Concord, Massachusetts, Northeast, that became known as the Second Revolution, a revolution in thinking. It began with Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and others that they would gather together to have conversations in a particular way. And they were developing what they would ultimately call transcendentalism, which is the idea that there is that in every single one of us that is transcendent or more than our circumstances, situations, or conditions. And yet we're all trained in decades of what Henry David Thoreau would call common hour thinking. So I want to do something. Well, where am I going to get the money? So I'm looking to conditions or circumstances for permission to live the life I want to live. You know, if only this would happen, then I could have this. Brave thinkers, on the other hand, develop the courage to think and live from a vision. And all the people that you've interviewed, the 400 amazing interviews, have found, whether they call it that or not, a form of thinking where they're not going to let circumstances win. That they win over the, it's not, they don't deny the circumstances or situations, but they don't let them win. And they're pulling from something that's greater than the circumstance, situation, or condition. And there's a way to hold our thinking and mind when circumstances can seem so daunting, so difficult, so impenetrable. And yet this works over and over again, and we have tons of history showing it. But basically, common hour thinkers look to circumstances, situations, and condition for permission to live and be and do and contribute what they want to live, be, do, and contribute. And brave thinkers summon the courage to think and live from a vision, regardless of the circumstances, situations, and conditions.
I love that. And yeah, definitely it's, I would call it, find a way, right? Find another way. Um, I have clients sometimes who just get so bollocksed up in their fear. And what I do and what I suggest to them, but it's, everybody's in their own place, is to say, acknowledge the fear. And then I just say, thank you for keeping me safe. I'm going to put you over here now because I've got work to do. And just, kind of go on, because I love this idea of common hour thinking and looking for permission, that if you get yourself, if you stay in that contracted place, I mean, I haven't actually seen the brainwave research, but it feels like it blocks your thinking. It drains your energy. It keeps you from even having the creative idea or having the brave idea that would get you to a more positive place. And I don't care if you're figuring out how to get electrons from a hydrogen, they're separating oxygen and, water into hydrogen and oxygen into a mobile unit to get it to a disaster area, or if you're trying to, fly a plane or whatever it is. You can't, your mind gets stuck in that fear place. And so how do you suggest to people in your own way that they get out of that place? I mean, how do you look at struggle? How do you get out of that?
Yeah, well, it's a natural human experience.
Yeah, it's contracting.
That's right, definitely. And from my experience helping with people, is fear is like the dark. You go in the house, you can't shout the dark away, beat it away with a broom, tell it doesn't belong there. It's dark. The only way to dissolve the dark is to turn the light on.
Mm-hmm.
So you were using exactly a light switch when you say, oh, I've got fear. So I'm going to say, thank you for all the things you're trying to do to help me, keep me safe, whatever. I'm putting you here now because I have work to do. So in essence, you're bringing, a stake in the ground. Fear can be over here. I'm going to do this. That's easier said than done. But on the other hand, one of the things that has helped me and tens of thousands of clients is that you look at square in the face and you say, what's the worst thing that can happen? I could lose my business. I could lose my reputation. I could look at square in the face and then say, every single thing that has ever happened in my life, from the moment I took my first breath to the moment I will take my last breath, there's been a power with me. It's this power, call it the power of life, call it whatever you want to call it. You and I didn't create ourselves. We can't make our heart beat one time under our own power. That there's this really miraculous, wonderful, sacred thing called life happening with each one of us. And we're not alone in that, meaning that life energy has been with us all along. And everything that seemed insurmountable, one way or another, you and it have found a way around it over this lifetime. So fear is actually the border between the life you've known and the life you can have. It's a border guard. And it seeks to keep you contracting back to the familiar, where you get seduced to think that's a safe place to live. But ultimately, it's a life that's waning and disintegrating right outside your view. So it's only when we're expanding and growing, that's what life is all about. So in the human sense, we're not pressing through cement like a blade of grass today to become more of ourselves, but we're pressing through other forms of cemented thinking or cemented circumstances, or all these things to bring a greater version of life by means of us in the ways that most matter and most bring aliveness to us.
And since you mentioned cement, there are people who are reinventing cement because it's made from petroleum products too. So there you go. Mm-hmm. Do you see struggle as a sign that we should abandon a course of action or to do something different? I mean, how do we know what it's telling us? Is it saying, don't try, that's not working, try this? Or is it saying tweak it? Or is it saying we need to change? Like, I loved what you said from the Dalai Lama, that he said that he had to evolve so that the pain wasn't painful anymore.
Well,
So how do we know what sign?
I don't think he said that it wasn't painful. He just said it was pain. I sat next to him for multiple times over 7 years, 7 days at a time, right next to him. He would get a phone call. Somebody would come and say in his ear, at one time particularly, it was a dear, dear friend he grew up with who had just been captured, he and his family, and taken where they would be for the rest. And I watched him. And then he took a breath And it was that practice of, even in this pain, get bigger. Even in this pain, get even, it's a practice you do. I don't know that he would ever say it wasn't painful.
Right. Well, I didn't mean that, right, but he did rise above it to the point where he could move past it. Right. So what I'm saying is, how do we know when we're struggling with something, whether it's, chemistry or being fired or whatever? How do we know if it's a sign, what it's telling us? How can we determine whether it's telling us to abandon the project and it's not going to work, or to pursue a different course, or do the same thing but do it differently, or if we need to change?
Well, it can't even be a combination of those things.
Yeah.
However, the results I'm having are, they're not happening to me, they're happening with me. So I'm a component in the construct of the results that are in my life. And there are other influencers. But when there's struggle, that you're going to ask yourself some questions. And one of those questions might be, is this a sign that I'm supposed to give up? Is this a sign? I'm not a big believer in signs, because it sounds like something outside me is predetermined whether or not this is. The question I encourage people to ask themselves is this: would I still love this outcome? Whatever I'm working on that I'm struggling with, would I love what this is meant to bring forth? Am I still in love with the vision of this? Because sometimes that can change. And part of the struggle is actually the feedback that I'm pushing on something that I'm actually no longer in love with. It just feels like I had to do it because I said I was going to do it. And you can change that. So it's more self-awareness to me. Am I still in love with this? If I'm in love with this, then there has to be a way. We're dealing with infinite possibilities. The possibility we most align with is the one that creates a probability vector. And whether it's something that's expansive or contractive, the one we agree with most is the one that we're going to see more feedback from this energy, showing us that's the frequency we're tuned to. We turn on our television and we've got at least 500, if not 1,000 different choices of programming. It's the one we're tuned to that's going to be seen on the picture of our screen. And the picture that we're most focused on in our major dominant thinking is the picture we see on the results of our life. Change the frequency and you're going to see things change in your life.
I love that. So you and I both work with organizations, and a lot of people in our networks work with organizations. And I see, to me, brave thinking is driving innovation, right? I've talked about that, and in driving the transition we need to make to a climate-friendly economy. Innovators see things differently. We put things together differently. I've driven, I'm sure you have too, record-breaking results in work by creating different alliances and campaigns that people at first thought were completely nuts. But organizations are calcified. Can be calcified. They can be stuck in what you call common hour thinking, right? And that you need all these 80 bazillion permissions. So how do you suggest that we sell brave thinking ideas in an organization? And how do we sell brave thinking as a practice within an organization?
There's a couple of ways. One is, of course, no organization can rise actually very far above its main leader, because that thinking dominates, depending now, your board of directors, all of those things. But the kind of trainings that are happening now in organizations that just weren't happening, Joan, many years ago,
right.
Which actually give people access to a way of seeing the power of the group thinking and posing questions. What if we could? That was the beginning of Transcendentalism. They got together, Emerson, other people that he personally invited to Sunday night conversations, calling them Concord Conversations, which were, rather than just focusing on the problem, identifying a problem and then using thinking to think beyond the problem. So one of the people he invited was Bronson Alcott, the father of 3 daughters, one of whom, Louisa May Alcott. And in those days, 1830s, 40s, women were considered chattel. The education system was full of corporal punishment, and girls were considered nothing. And he knew he had these 3 bright girls, but an education system that was not supportive to them coming out with their own talents and gifts. And so the question was, what if we created a new education system? I mean, the Dewey Decimal System came out of these conversations. William James and American psychology, these all came out of what if we? So to have a kind of think tank or a framework in organizations that give rise to a generative thinking around problem solving versus just focusing on the problem. What if we? What could we do? And we could if, bringing that line in, we could if this happened, or we could if that happened. So that rather than we can't because of this, is well, we could if. And then once we start generating ideas of what would be required, different ideas come that could actually help support that change.
And I would pose exactly, and I would totally love that. And I would add to that when you get, it's neurolinguistic programming in a way that when you get people thinking about what if we did, how that would play out, you actually move their brain cells, their neurons in that direction, which has a similar kind of chemical shift as you went through with your kidneys, right? It
100%.
creates. Yeah. But and I've noticed that people kind of perk up after a while too. Instead of the, I can't, I go, okay, well, just pretend with me for a minute and let's try this. And can I just go talk to them and, and see what happens? And then, oh, by the way, and then they see the hockey stick growth and they go, how did you get from this to this? It's okay.
Remember Henry Ford's famous line, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
You're right. Exactly. Do you see this show is called Electric Ladies. There are a lot of differences between men and women. Do you see differences between men and women when it comes to brave thinking and embracing some of these ideas around transformational thinking and maybe I can, what if I could, what if we could?
The thing that might be different, I've been doing this work now for 40 plus years, is the openness. Women, we're, centuries and centuries of programming in our brains that we're collaborative and that we, sit in circles and generate ideas through conversations, where men have been trained, through the early programming in the brain to be hunters and, and to go out, slay some kind of problem, bring home the fruit of that and bring it, put it on the doorstep of your family, and you get rewarded for that. So the opportunity, but we're in a world today where I don't find once a male or a female has the heart to really want to do something that's beyond them, that has a greater good to it, to all concerned. It's not just greater good to them and their family. That must be included. You can't leave yourself out of the circle of good, but that the circle of good includes a much larger scope than just yourself. So my major work has been with heart-centered entrepreneurs, people who don't just care about the bottom line, they care about the full spectrum of life. We all have results in 4 areas. You can measure them right now, what your current results are in health, relationships, vocation, what you're doing with your time and talent, whether you earn income doing it or not, vocational fulfillment, and then freedom, which is time freedom and money freedom to do the things that really matter to you and give to the causes that you believe would most impact your values and help in the world. So having freedom in all those 4 quadrants, but there are many people who trade vocational success or money success, and they end up bankrupt in health or relationships. And that's not a full spectrum wealth experience. So you can have wealth in all 4 quadrants. And I think men and women are equally drawn to that.
It's interesting because I find that I loved what you said, that, women are more collaborative and men tend to, slay the food and then come back and expect a reward for that, right? And the greater good. And today we can have both the greater good and be collaborative and solve that big challenge together instead of doing it off on our own, right? Um, so a couple quick things, and then I want to get some career advice from you for, even though in many ways our entire discussion is career advice, but you write in Brave Thinking about what you call blueprinting, bridging, and building, that's a model for how to operationalize the brave thinking concepts into one's life. All of us at Electric Ladies in our community are trying to solve these big challenges, to make the world a better place and save the planet. Or I should say, save our livability on the planet. The planet's going to survive. It's whether we can live on it that's the issue. So, what is your model for blueprinting, bridging, and building, and how can we just sort of in a brief form, how can we start that process in our own lives in wherever we are?
The research that I've done over these years of what really brings transformation, it's the first part of that is a vision. Is you don't ignore your current circumstances. But most people, when they're creating a vision, they use common hour thinking. What do I think I can do? What does the circumstances say I can do? What does the economy say I can do? What does my access to money and resources say I can do? And then create a vision that answers the question, what do I think I can bring forth? A different question is the what would I love question. It takes you outside circumstances, and you have to guard your thinking so you don't collapse down. Well, that's not going to happen because where am I ever going to get the money? You leave the how out. When you're creating a vision, it's the what. What would I absolutely love? It's 3 years from now in my health, my relationships. Maybe I've been so busy in my career field, I haven't taken time or desire, but I really deep down want that love in my life. And where do I want to put my head on the pillow for the very last time and never have had that happen, to love and be fully loved in this lifetime, in this human experience? Do I care about that? It doesn't matter. You don't have to care about it. But if you do care about it and you've kept it stuffed down, it's not a full spectrum life. So you take time to ask yourself questions in my health, my relationship, vocation, time and money, freedom. And every time though, how am I going to get that? We push the how aside for now and we get a really good, strong what. That is the blueprint. So it's designed enough so that you can actually imaginally step inside of it. So I'm stepping in, I'm in a hospital bed in intensive care, can't lift my head up off the pillow, but I'm imagining walking this little boy into kindergarten and feeling his warm hand and hearing the click of my heels, and there's my classroom. So you, regardless of your circumstances, you put on create a vision that really is igniting and alive making to you. And then, well, how the hell am I going to do this? Of course, those thoughts are going to come. We'll address those thoughts in the second phase, which is the phase of bridging, where you have a vision. The vision dictates the frequency or the vibration. So you step inside that life. It's more life-giving. It's more expansive. It all worked out. You hold that energy. So that's your vision. Then the bridging is causing yourself to think from the vision rather than from the circumstances. So if the money were available, and I knew that, what step could I take today? So there's a number of tools in Brave Thinking that we bring forth in the book and the other free products we give to help you know how to discern and then bring in the thoughts that help you come from. See, here's the deal. This came right out of Thoreau's and their early work, and it took me years to see that this is really what they were saying, is that you can't get to your dream. It's impossible. You have to come from your dream. So if I've got CNN or problem news on the TV and I want discovery or romance, I got to change the frequency I'm tuned to, and all those pictures change. So when you're practicing being the person, having the life you've imagined, Thoreau says it this way, you pass an invisible boundary. All sorts of things begin to occur that never otherwise would have occurred. If one advances confidently in the direction of their dream, you can't advance in a direction you don't have a clear idea of. If one advances confidently in the direction of their dream, endeavoring not to get to the dream, endeavoring to live the life they've imagined when? Now. So you're doing mundane things like maybe doing some dishes, and you've got this vision, and how the heck am I ever going to get there? And you're going to have thoughts of being the person who wants the dream. If you're living the life you've imagined, that person doing the same activity is grateful, appreciative, open, and grateful for the ideas that came today to help me take even a baby step forward in this direction. It's all coming together, completely different thoughts in the same activity with the vision that hasn't yet coalesced into the forms that we call our results. So it's a process. So it's blueprinting, having a clear vision, bridging, which are full of tool in the work that I produced after all these years of studying with people, how to hold state. So you have the frequency that's in your vision, but I got to be that person in order for things, all kinds of things to show up that I can't make happen, but I make welcome by means of being on that frequency.
It's interesting that you say that. I'm just going to interrupt for a second. I'm developing a technology and that will help women. And I've been struggling with raising the money for it, or figuring out ways to raise the money for it. And there's a piece of research that we need to do to move it forward. And I was talking to a woman who I'd had on my show in the past, and we were just kind of brainstorming about different things. And I happened to mention this, and she said, well, wait a minute, I have access to a research platform. We can do that research, and it's not going to cost you anything.
That's what I was going to say.
Like,
what if you didn't need
you
the,
don't
what if you didn't?
how would I know that she had? I mean, there's no way for me to know. So what I'm saying is, you don't know what resources people have that they can share with you that don't actually require the exchange of money, and um, and they may even want to help you in that regard. You don't know what their situation is, right? And so when you talk about being open to the solution, it's also about being open to where it might come from.
That's right. And just know that it has to be, if you have an idea that you're in love with, we're dealing with infinite possibilities. The one you focus on, the one you agree with, like this is going to be really hard. I don't know how that would be. So the frequency of struggle is inside that thinking. Like there has to be an answer here because this is such a good thing. This, what I'm working on, Joan is saying to herself, what I'm working on is so good for women that even though I've been thinking I have to have the money, what if I don't have to have the money? I just need the research. And there are lots of places and people who could be interested in this. So I'm holding that either the money or the ability to do the research, it has to be here because this is such a good life-giving idea. And
yeah, exactly. I love that. So one other just sort of nuance to this. One of my guests that I interviewed at COP26, this brilliant scientist, said something really interesting. She said, in effect, and I'm paraphrasing because the way she said it was beautiful, your dreams change. That you may not have, you may be qualified for the next level from what your dream has been. Like we have goals for our lives, and I do this goal setting workshop and process of which to me is powerful because it revolves around who you are today and where the marketplace is today, not just recycling old goals. So one of the things that's interesting to me about what you're saying is it allows the dream that you have today to have wings, instead of just saying, well, this is what I've always wanted to do X, or I've always wanted to do Y, and I could never, and and so that you keep recycling that one, when what you're saying is, don't worry that the dream you imagine has changed, just embrace where it is now.
what
Am I right?
most brings you aliveness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So one other sort of interesting question for you, because I can't resist, and then we'll get some career advice. Some incredibly brilliant innovators have a dark side. They're usually men, I might add. Einstein was considered to lack social skills, was thrown out of school, was a bit of a had women things. Stephen King was an addict. There are other brilliant writers and musicians and artists who've been addicts, alive or not. My great great uncle, I don't know if you know, but my great great uncle was a very famous physicist who is the C in equals MC squared. He was extraordinarily brilliant, but he had a woman thing happening. Elon Musk, we can talk about. So, how do you frame this idea of so many people, so many super brilliant people having this, what I'll call the dark side? You may not call it that, but I'll call it that.
I want to be sure we include women in this because, I mean,
Yeah.
missing her name, but the woman who did the thing with the blood testing, I mean, more recently.
Oh, yeah. Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah.
Yes.
Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah. No, exactly. I'm sure there are. Yeah.
So think about this. We have the experience of being human, being alive through contrast. So this experience called human life and life as we know it, it's based in duality or contrast. So the only way you know you're alive today is the idea of being dead is in your awareness. So I'm alive, I'm not dead. I feel good, not bad, because I know what feeling bad, or have the awareness that some people feel very bad. So through contrast, we have the experience of who we're going to be, how we're going to be. So the evolution then of values gives rise to a kind of soul awareness in us, or the part of us that's more than just, am I going to get mine? Am I going to get mine? Am I going to get mine? That the more I care about the group winning, or everyone I touch having a benefit by means of what I've brought into the moment of connection, that increase, when I bring increase, I don't have to worry about my increase. Increase and increase are on the same wavelength. But if I'm competitive, and there's a natural competition, but if I'm competitive in a way that only matters if I win and I don't care if you lose, there's a decomposing, really, of the person's awareness and their ability to actually bring good. And there's a tremendous, both physical and cost to that kind of life. So the dark side is, that's in our human nature. We have light and we have dark. It's everywhere present. So every one of us in any given moment is choosing who we're going to be in this moment and what do we really deeply care about. So look at you. You care deeply about impacting lives, about bringing good, taking you're curious, you bring questions that help us look at ourselves and the difference we can bring in the world. And yes, the corporations may have calcified in this and that, but we can bring new ideas in. And how can we do that? And so you're leaving the seeds of good by means of your presence. That only thing that can come back is more of that. So for every one of us, we have the temptation to, the question, the thought. I remember in my early days of studying the spiritual principles, I had thoughts like, well, who's going to know? And the most important person in the universe is going to know. I'm going to know. That's who it's going to know. And the degradation then of my sense of, being who I can really be, begins with that one choice, doing something that I know isn't right, but who's going to know? So the more we just lean into again and again, who's the most important person we can be here to bring the values, the difference that I seek to bring in this world present in this moment.
Oh, I love that. Yep. Sounds like also enjoying your own company, right? People talk about loneliness. I did an article during the pandemic called "The Gift of Being Alone," because so many people were alone and struggling with it. About how we can, the self-awareness that comes from it, enjoying your own company, free time, the creativity that can come from that. I mean, I know so many people who finished books or wrote whole books or finished their PhD or did XYZ project, and communities that were built that way. Our mutual friend DC Cordova built Fridays with Doria, that is still going on. And so you can find a gift in that too, right? I could talk to you for about 10 hours, but I will let you go. Before I let you go, I like to give career advice to mid-career women. And I would say that's roughly 15 years of working experience, or whatever mid-career feels like to you. What advice would you give to a woman who wants to use her education and her experience to make a difference? She knows what she's good at. She wants to excel, is ambitious, wants to make money, and doesn't feel that it should be a trade-off. So what advice would you give to her?
When you say a trade-off, meaning
Meaning that making a difference and making money and then excelling in her career should not need to be one or the other, but that she can do both, make a difference and make money.
Yes.
And excel.
Well, start with a vision. What it is that most matters to you that you would come forth and bring. Hold in your mind. You don't have to know how, but you do have to know what it is that most matters to you. So fast forward in your mind, it's 3 years from now or 5 years from now, and it all worked out. If it all worked out and what kind of income would you really be making that you would love? What difference are you making? What impact are you bringing? How many hours a week are you working? How much free time in the year are you working? Taking 2 months a year off, where you're nurturing relationships and family and health and climbing mountains or doing whatever else, feed your soul, so that when you come back to your career work, it's all part of one thing. So you design a work life that answers, what would I love? What would I bring? What would I create? What would I earn? What is my time off like? And get a really clear picture of that. And then begin to apply the things we've been talking about today. What step can I take that moves me in this direction? And get the book, Brave Thinking. It'll take you through a
Very good segue, Mary. Very good. Very good. I love that. What step can I take today? That's so important. Thank you so much for joining me today on Electric Ladies podcast, Mary Morrissey. Any final thoughts before I let you get back to your life?
Just that if you do go to bravethinkingbook.com and order a copy, there's a number of free gifts that we're going to send your way. Designing a Life You Love, meditation, 100 common hour thoughts and how to transform them, and winning the battles of the mind. So I put all that together as a gift, and I'm grateful to be able to share that. So I want to say thank you. My final thought is, there's the only limits are really in our minds. So watch out for those thoughts, and then say, okay, that doesn't have to be true. That's a thought, but it doesn't have to be true. And here's my vision. So, and congratulations on your beautiful, beautiful work, Joan. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mary, so much. I appreciate it. Please join me in thanking Mary Morrissey for joining us today on Electric Ladies podcast. And yes, her book is Brave Thinking. I love that. So how do you think about brave thinking? How might that change how you make choices and feel? Post it to us on Twitter and Threads at Joan Michelson. Send us any questions there as well, and you may win a complimentary 30-minute coaching session with me. Please subscribe to our mailing list to stay abreast of our amazing guests like Mary, our articles, and career advice. And you can subscribe on electricladiespodcast.com. I'm Joan Michelson. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.